No, nothing. Unless you didn't want to make it up. I can make it up.
All right, so good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for excuse me, for the group attending online as well. We are happy to have you here, and we are happy that we have Amy Denton all the way from Rocky Mountain, North Carolina. She is with CFNC, College Foundation in North Carolina, and she has been with College Foundation North Carolina since, when did you?
About 14 years.
14 years, wow. So we first met a long time ago. You probably haven't been at CFNC too long then. Anyway, she is great at her job. She has some very valuable information to pass on to y'all tonight. So I'm going to pass the mic and.
All right, thank you. Are you guys, can I take my copy from over here? All right, thanks for letting me be here tonight with you. So I've got a driver too. Fantastic. Okay, good. So you're all seniors, is that right? Graduating seniors, planning the next steps, other than my 10th grader friend right here, and those of you that are online. So I hope that the information I'm going to share with you tonight will make you a little bit more comfortable about the process, and certainly feel welcome to ask questions. And those of you online, if you ask questions, we'll get those answered too. So let's go ahead and get started. And we at College Foundation, if you're not familiar with who we are a resource on behalf of the state of North Carolina to make sure that we can provide information to students and families in North Carolina to help you with your next steps beyond high school. So be it a career pathway or college, meaning 2-year to 4-year certificate, it does not matter. So the resources that we have on CFNC with our collaboration with these 5 other folks in this wheel make possible the information that we can share with you as a free resource to North Carolinians. So that's a little bit about who we are. So we're going to talk tonight about all the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, why of financial aid. So first of all, let's make sure you're understanding the college cost. I hope by now you've already begun to start looking at your college selections and maybe narrowing down those options and thinking about applying. If you're not the senior this year, certainly now is the time to start looking to narrow down the options. We have 111 colleges in North Carolina, and they're all featured on our website. So you can do your research to find out which ones may be best suited for you. So when it comes to the college cost, every college determines its total cost of attendance by looking at direct and indirect cost. All of those direct costs you see up here, tuition fees, and if you're living on a college campus, room and board, you're going to be billed for those costs. But colleges know that you're going to incur so many other costs to go to college, so we call those your indirect costs. College can't bill you for those, but we know you're going to be spending your monies for these particular costs. So they combine the direct and indirect costs to come up with the total cost of attendance, which is helpful for you to know because financial aid offices can give you financial assistance up to the cost of attendance for that college campus. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then understanding the types of financial aid, there are only 4 groups. Every bit of money that ever may come your way to help you in college will be classified into 4 different ways. So scholarships and grants, and we call those the gift aid. Why do we call those gift aid? They're free. That's exactly right. They're free monies you don't pay back. So that's why we call scholarships and grants gift money. In most circumstances, you would never have a reason to pay those money backs, or those monies can never be taken from you. But then we have 2 other types called loans and employment. So having a job on a college campus, like a work study position, getting paid for that, and you, the student, you pocket that money. That can be really helpful for you to pay your expenses across the campus, supplies, and whatever else you decide. And then, of course, we know when it comes to loans, when we borrow, we have to do what? Eventually pay them back. That's exactly right. So we'll talk more about loans too. There are 2 big differences between the types of money you can get to go to college when you file the Fafsa, the free application for federal student aid, all of those dollars are what we call need-based. Otherwise, the government wouldn't ask you about your income and your assets and investments. So the government, the federal government needs to know, do you qualify based on the financial need of your household? So that's why we have need-based funds, but the opposite of need-based funds are the merit dollars. Those are going to be the funds you get because of how well you've done right here at school. Maybe your leadership abilities, your talent that you have. Some of you may end up going to school and getting an art scholarship, music, dance, theater, chorus, maybe an athletic at some point in time down the road. You never know. So those dollars are considered merit because of how well you do something. The college does not consider your financial need of your household when you get merit money. Totally opposite, okay? And so here is the FAFSA process. How many of you have filed your FAFSA or started the process already? I know you guys have. Not yet? Not yet, okay. You will need, before you can actually submit your FAFSA, for those of you online too, you all will need your FSA ID, your Federal Student Aid ID. The student will need it that's applying for financial aid, and one of the parents will need the ID. It is your electronic signature when you submit the FAFSA. You can use it to log in, the student ID, to log into the FAFSA. If you don't have it at that point, don't worry, but when it's time to actually submit it, you have to have your IDs in order for the FAFSA to be submitted electronically. Otherwise, you would be printing the signature pages, you would be physically signing it and mailing it in if you didn't have your ID. It's a username and password. You create it, and it sticks with you for all of your years that you're going to be in college. You would never have reason to have more than one ID, and the government will not let you have more than one ID, okay? And even if as parents, if you have other children coming up to go to college, or if you've already had one to go to college and you have reason to have your ID, you will use that same ID to recognize you, the parent, for any other child that you have applying for financial aid down the road, okay? We do send everybody to studentaid.gov. Now the federal government is consolidating all of their web addresses. So everyone will need to go to studentaid.gov to file the FAFSA, get your IDs, and do any type of search or research about federal student aid, okay? So there are 7 parts to the FAFSA, and we're going to look at some of these tonight. One of the first sections of the FAFSA has a lot to do with your dependency status. We can go to the next slide and I'll show you, you can flip on to the next slide and I'll show you this. So as you're completing the FAFSA every year, this is one of the first sections. This was part 3 of the FAFSA. The government needs to know who you are after you answer these questions to know how do you answer the remaining parts of the FAFSA, what types of questions to ask you. So every year when you complete the FAFSA, you will be expected to answer these questions. Who knows, at some point in time in your household, some situations could change, and maybe you're going to have to a reason in one year to change the answer compared to the year before. So let's kind of walk through them for this upcoming year. If you're going to be in college in the fall of 2022, that's next August, here are the questions that are asked of you on this year's FAFSA that you'll be completing. So first of all, when were you born? So were you born before January 1st, 1999? Are you married? Are you, do you have any children or a child that you financially support? Are you an active duty or a veteran of the armed forces? Will you be working on a graduate degree in the upcoming year? We know some of those already automatically will be no. You haven't even gotten your bachelor's degree. You can't be working on your graduate degree before you get your bachelor's degree. And then the next slide will have some other questions. If by the time you turn the age of 13, if both of your parents have passed away, so if this doesn't apply to any of you in the room tonight, but any of your classmates, if you recognize some of these questions may apply to your classmates, just make sure they know this. So if by the age of 13, both of your parents were deceased, and at any point in time, you were in foster care, or you were a dependent or ward of the court, then you can answer yes to that question. The next question goes on to ask, are you an emancipated minor? So did you, in essence, take your parent to court to become legally free of them by the age of 17? Do you have a legal guardian? So this is someone, not a parent, that has gone through a court of law, and there's a document to show that this person is the legal guardian for the student. Okay, so that's what that means. Not custody. Custody is totally something separate than guardianship. And then the last question has to do with the student's living situation, which quite often can put them in a homeless status, self-supporting, or risk of being homeless. So if you answer no to all of those questions, then you are dependent upon a parent or parents. If you answer yes to any of those questions, all it takes is you, one question, answering yes. You must provide proof to the financial aid office why you answered yes. And then, of course, if you answer yes for the right reason, they're going to classify you as independent, which means no person's data will be asked about after this point on the FAFSA but you, the student, nobody else, right? And we'll go to the next slide, and I'll talk about this, and then we'll pause just quickly to see if there are any questions. So if you answer no to all of those questions, which means the government says you are a dependent student upon parents, here are who our parents are. Kind of weird to say that, isn't it? Who our government says our parents are that can help file a FAFSA. So that means biological or adoptive parents, whether it's one or two of them. If you live with them, then they put their information on the FAFSA. If they are married, then obviously both people put their data. If they're not married, you live with them, both people must put their data on the FAFSA. It could be that you're widowed, single, never been married, whatever the case is. If it's just one parent, then only one parent puts the data on the FAFSA. And then it gets down to this last situation here. If there's been a separation or divorce in the household, you're going to put the parent that you live the majority of the school year with, the calendar year, rather. So the majority of the calendar year, if you live with parent one, then parent one is the parent that's going to put their information on the FAFSA. And if that parent has remarried and now there's a step parent, then you must put the step parent data too. Okay? You do not put the parent that's not living in the household. If there is a situation, there's a 50-50. If parent one has 50% living, parent two has 50% living, then the second question you have to ask yourself is, who provides the greater financial support for me? And whoever that may be, parent one or parent two, that's the parent that you put on the FAFSA. So let's pause and see if you have any questions up to this point, online and here. Yes?
So if you're living with one parent, but a second parent provides like financial aid to your family, you don't put their information?
The question is, if you're living with one parent, the parent two over here provides financial support, really means I guess the question can be asked a little bit deeper. It's, what do you mean by financial support? If there's child support coming to the household, you do report on the FAFSA the parent that may not be living in your household. There is a question on the FAFSA that asks you to report any child support that's coming into the household. So you'll report the parent that you live with, and if the other parent is providing child support, you must answer that question and provide that dollar amount there. That is considered an untaxed income that's coming into the household as a reason to support you. So that's a great question. Any other questions? Any others online by chance? Okay, cool. So are we good so far with knowing the types of financial aid, understanding the cost, understanding who's going to help you file the FAFSA? Perfect. All right, we'll move on. So here are some circumstances sometimes that the government You cannot document this to the government on the FAFSA. So after you complete the FAFSA, any given year, if for some reason in your household, a parent loses their job, parents separate, God forbid a parent passes away, there are some outstanding medical or dental bills that insurance does not cover. Those are circumstances that you have no way to report on a FAFSA. So what do? You have to have a physical conversation with the college financial aid office and let them know that, okay, I filed my FAFSA, because remember, you're going to be filing your FAFSA on tax information from 2 years ago, from 2 years at the point that you're going to be enrolled. So for this upcoming FAFSA, the 2022-23, I have to say that carefully, 22-23 FAFSA, because that's the year you're going to be in college, you will use 2 years ago tax data. So that means 2020 tax data. Always remember the FAFSA it will certainly tell you that, will point that out. But just remember that it's 2 years prior to the year of enrollment. So if you're going to be in college in the fall of 2024, what year tax data will you use? 2022. If you're in college in the fall of 2024, it's going to be 22 tax data, 2022 tax data, okay? So because 2020 has been said and done, and you filed taxes, parent was living, parents were married, parent had a job, but for some reason at this point in time, parent's not living, parent doesn't have a job, parents are not together. That can make a big difference in your financial aid eligibility on that college campus. And colleges know how to manually calculate or recalculate your aid eligibility because of circumstances like this, okay? So just make sure you have the conversations if something in your household were to change after you file the FAFSA, okay? All right. So here are sometimes, this can be confusing for families, and I want to make sure, I've just recently started adding this in my presentations, just to make sure you understand this. You will be asked on the FAFSA how many people live in your household. And this makes a difference in how much aid you can receive from a college. So of course, you're going to report you, the student. You're going to report your parents, whether it's 2 people or 1 person. You're also going to report any other siblings in the household that you have, because they are being dependent upon your parents. And you do get to report anyone else in the household that your parents are financially supporting. So I'm going to give the example of sometimes, grandma. Grandma may have to come live with us, and my parents are supporting my grandmother. Then we get to count grandma as a member of my household. Or let's say parents, you have a child that has moved out of your house. They're living on their own. It was their choice to have an apartment. They're making their own money. They're paying the majority of their bills. They're not married. They don't have a child. They're not military. They're not homeless. They're not, don't have their bachelor's degree yet in college. Maybe they're still attending community college. They're still working on a degree, a bachelor's degree. If they're not the age of 24 by this point in time, you still get to count them as a member of your household. Because for the sake of them, if they completed a FAFSA for the purpose of them trying to get aid, guess what? They would answer no to all of those dependency questions. So it would look like they're still dependent upon their parents, but they've just chosen to move out for whatever the reason may be, as long as it's a good reason. Then you still get to count that student as a member of your household. So sometimes parents don't know that, and they don't count that person as a member of their household because they thought since they moved out, they're on their own, that they don't count, but they do count, okay? So just remember that. And we'll flip on to the next slide. So here is a part of the FAFSA that over the past many years now, the government has made, hopefully for parents and students, you remember, if you work and you make enough money to file taxes, you are going to be expected to do some of the same things that your parent may do on the FAFSA. And the same questions you will be asked on the FAFSA too that you will be expected to answer. If you're making money and you're paying taxes, then you will have to answer those same sets of questions. But here's a part of the FAFSA. Look up at the top, the little check marks. We're now on step 5 of the FAFSA. The parent financials. Step 6 is the student financials. So if you have filed your taxes, so your 2020 data is sitting out with the IRS. When you get to this point, you will have the option to link to the IRS to retrieve your data and import it into your FAFSA. So you will need some key identifying pieces of information regarding your 2020 taxes. So always have them close by. And if indeed the government can match who you are based on the questions they ask you once you land on the IRS's website, then you're going to have the option to pull that data in. So you manually don't have to answer all those questions. If for some reason you just choose not to do the linking, or you are not presented with the option to link, you will just manually have to answer the financial questions regarding taxes. The good news is the tax return that you completed, the FAFSA will tell you what line item. You did the 1040. Go out and pull 13D and put it right here in the FAFSA. So it tells you exactly what line item to go pull if you have to manually answer the questions. Most of you probably will be the candidate or candidates to do the DRT, and the government will expect you to do it. If for some reason you just choose not to do it, the government knows that. So most likely you will be flagged for what we call verification. And that means the college will ask proof of you why you answered the questions the way you did. You may have answered them exactly just like your taxes said, but because they know you should have linked to the IRS if information matched, they're going to want that information. And they're going to remind you. Go out to the DRT, go log back into your FAFSA and link to the IRS. Go back out, link, we want that information. Basically is what they're going to keep reminding you of, okay? But this will make your life a little bit easier when you're filling out the FAFSA if you can do the data retrieval. All right, so everybody must apply. The financial aid form, the FAFSA, is the start of the entire financial aid process. It's money you can get from the federal government and the state of North Carolina, our federal government and our state government. No matter what you may think about the income of your household and whether you are at a point that you're not going to qualify because there's too much income of the household, or when I applied for my other child and they didn't get any money, I'm not even going to try it this year. Don't think that. Because most institutions, practically all of them, if they have other pots of money in their household that not their household, their institution, that they would like to award, they cannot award those funds until they see proof that you have a FAFSA on file. They need to see that you have exhausted your chance of federal and state funds before they start giving their own institutional money out. Remember, that has nothing to do with merit-based funding. Nothing to do with merit-based, because you deserve those dollars and how well you performed in high school. But they could have other monies to help you. Now, some of you, if you're looking at Davidson, Duke, Elon, Wake Forest, or Chapel Hill, so tell your friends. If any of you are looking at those 5 schools, you will also be required to fill out the CSS Profile. The CSS Profile is a form through College Board's website, and it's a very intense financial aid questionnaire. Much more so than the FAFSA. So you'll have to do the FAFSA and the CSS Profile. And this is the time of the year to do that. You may want to talk to, of course, Mr. Hewitt, your school counselor, to ask, should I complete it before I find out if I'm accepted, or should I just wait until I'm an accepted student to complete it? because it is pretty detailed. So just make sure you're having those conversations and know that you need to complete it. Just think about the names of those schools I mentioned. They're very competitive institutions with limited pots of money. But they want to make sure, and look at the cost that they also are, that they can give you additional funding to help you afford their college and your education there, if they can give you that. That's why they require the CSS. They want to know a whole lot more financial background on you than the FAFSA would ever ask, okay? And so here are the 5 sources of free funding. Starts with the FAFSA, federal and state government. And then look at the college or the institution you're going to. Look at their school websites to make sure that you know all the available scholarship funding opportunities that they have to offer. Make sure you're looking at any local organizations right here in your county or your back door. And you probably are already shared with them how they access that information. Look at the state-based scholarships that we have on CFNC's website. So if you go to cfnc.org/scholarships, you're going to see about 120 that we have listed there in North Carolina. And then lastly, look at the national levels of scholarships. I'm going to give you some websites in just a few moments. So the 5 primary areas, we're going to sum this up again, looking very globally. All starts with the FAFSA. National level of scholarships, state level, the institution, and then local. So those are going to be the dollars outside of your FAFSA, those 4 areas of scholarships that you can find to support your education. So don't stop looking. Keep being very proactive to make sure you're researching all your scholarship opportunities. Even if you just have to do some Google searches, just do them to find out all the ways you can apply. And don't miss out on any deadlines. I'm sure some deadlines have already passed. But if you wait till after the new year, wait till second semester, you may be behind the 8 ball. So start now and make sure you're going to be ahead of the game. So here are some opportunities for federal funding. So when you submit that FAFSA, if you qualify, the federal government has 2 primary grants. The Pell Grant, which goes to the neediest of the households with little to no income. Then there's the SEOG grant. That's a smaller grant, much smaller grant than the Pell Grant. Pell Grant can be awarded up to close to $7,000 a year if you qualify. The SEOG is just typically a couple $100 for each student. And then there's the loans. The government will let you borrow money, students, without cosigners, without a credit check. It's just your right to go to college. The government will let you borrow money. You are capped, though. That's the good news. You just can't go out and pick a wild number. I'm going to borrow $50,000. No. The government caps you based on your classes that you've successfully completed and passed. So meaning as you go into college, for example, with freshman hours, credit hours, you can only get $5,500. As a sophomore, $6,500. As a junior and senior, only $7,500. That's it. Parents can qualify for loans from the federal government too, but parents do have to go through a credit check. And your eligibility for determination of your aid amount is totally different from the parents. You're not technically capped automatically. Interest rates are fixed. That's the good news. You both would have 10 years to repay your loans. That's the standard repayment. You can always go into longer repayments beyond the 10 years. We won't know your interest rates until this upcoming summer. So these are the interest rates for this current school year. And then North Carolina has 4 grants. And we break down our grants based on the type of college that you attend. So if you qualify because of your FAFSA and you plan to attend one of our 16 UNC campuses, you could get the UNC need-based. Our community colleges have their own grant. Our 36 private schools have their own grant. And then the last one is the lottery. The lottery scholarship goes to students who qualify, planning to go to a public school. So one of our 16 UNC campuses or one of our 58 community colleges. So if you go to a public school and you qualify, you could get 2 grants. If you go to a private school in North Carolina, you only can get 1. Right? All you do is fill out the FAFSA, colleges will tell you the rest. And in order for us to be, to look at you for the chance of giving you those North Carolina grants, you must complete your residency first. So your NC residency is a centralized way for us to determine if you are a resident of North Carolina. Those colleges that are public can only charge you the in-state tuition rate, because there is a difference, in-state and out-of-state. And if you are indeed a resident, we can consider you for those grants. Has anybody done this already? Good. Oh, good. Okay. So those of you online, just make sure you're going to the NC Residency website to complete it. We do have an alternative loan in North Carolina too that we brought back at College Foundation. We modeled our loan very similar to the federal government because there is a difference. Federal government loans are different than private alternative loans. But we brought a private alternative loan back to the state of North Carolina. We don't charge fees. Federal government charges fees. We do not. Our interest rate for the student will be higher than the interest rate for the federal government rate, but our interest rate for the parents will be lower, is always going to be lower than the federal government. We did that on purpose because we want to make sure our parent loan is a little bit more attractive than the federal government. The criteria to qualify for the parent loan for us in CSS may be a little bit more stringent. We require a 700 credit score, but if you do qualify, you're eligible to borrow. And it's the same calculation that the federal government uses to determine how much you can borrow. We use the same calculation. Still get 10 years to repay your loan. So a lot of what we have for our loan is very similar to the federal government. The biggest difference will be the interest rates. So that's why we always push students to go the federal loan route first if you need to borrow. If you need to borrow, let that be your option. Parents, you've got something that's a little bit competitive, okay? We've already passed on that. And here are those websites. So look at the ones toward the bottom there, starting with College Board. So College Board has a huge database of scholarships if you haven't been on that yet. Their portal is called Big Future. And then there's FastWeb. These are just some examples that we share. You may get some other examples here from school to make sure you're just listening to what's being passed by your way. FastWeb, Peterson's, and College Greenlight. If you only get on one of them, I would say go College Board. They're super reputable. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, take a picture. I won't be in your way. And then those websites at the top of the page could be helpful for our foster youth. If you've ever been in foster care, the Golden Leaf is big. Is Pasquotank County one of the Golden Leaf? Okay, good. And then the scholarships website, I'll remind you of that for North Carolina. And then we do have a Forgivable loan for service program called FELS, F-E-L-S. This is primarily awarded to students once they're in their academic major on their college campus, but you have to be eligible by your intended major. So nursing, many areas of allied health, social work, many medical doctorate fields. So just go out to the FELS website and you'll see all the criteria. And basically it's a loan from the state of North Carolina, but once you graduate, as long as you work in our state in that profession, 1 year of your work will cancel out 1 year of the loan. So you can only get it by going to a North Carolina school, and you can only have it forgiven by working in North Carolina. So check that out. And lastly, College Foundation is on these social media sites, Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, and we have tons of videos and recorded webinars at YouTube. We have some very short how-to videos under that particular playlist, like how to create a CFNC account, how do I send transcripts, how do I apply to college, how do I do RDS, how do I file the FAFSA. Very short, 2, 3, 4 minutes long, that we hope will be very attractive to you to make sure that, you know, these are the things you got to be doing now as you're preparing for college. So check out some of those how-to videos. And lastly, I am on Facebook and Instagram, Amy at CFNC, and just continue to browse our website. Call us. Our toll-free telephone number is there on our website too. If you have any questions about where to find something, or just general questions about financial aid or about preparation for college. That's why we exist. Our call center help folks. They work from their homes now, but they answer the phone calls when you're calling that telephone number. So we're here to help. So are there any questions that you guys have, or anything that may have popped up online that I can answer for you? Phil, anything that you think that sometimes comes up?
Got a couple things, but if
Okay.
anybody else has any questions today, I got a couple things I'll follow up on.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and let him share those things so we don't forget. He doesn't forget.
So just a word about the local scholarships. So for us, most of those will be in the springtime. So Rotary Club, Optimist Club, some of them are specific to your major, like the like a Potato Association scholarship, I think, which is for certain like agricultural related fields. So there's a whole bunch of them where the people from the organizations, they will reach out to me and Coach Doran, and then we'll send out emails, because a lot of them are very kind of like time sensitive. So we'll send out an email to the students and to the parents, and then in student services, we'll kind of set up I call it a scholarship buffet, where we'll put all the applications out if it's not one that I can just email out to everybody. Some organizations actually bring in paper applications, and then we will just hand those out at the school. So definitely in the spring semester, we'll be busy with local scholarships. So I think you did a great job covering everything just very, very succinctly. Yeah. So me, myself, and I have to get busy on the FAFSA for my own daughters. So yeah. So if there's no more questions, though, I appreciate everybody coming, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Please fill out the feedback form.
Oh yes, and please.
I do have a question from the online chat. They asked if you would mind explaining again about the quote link to IRS.
Oh, yeah, sure. So the link to the IRS, when you get to that part of the FAFSA, it's the section 5, part 5 of the FAFSA. If you select that you have completed your 2020 taxes, it's going to move on down as you're looking good so far. Then it's going to ask you what tax return did you complete. And then thirdly, it's going to ask what was your tax filing status. So the big thing there is, this sometimes is what catches people as to whether they can do the data retrieval or not. So if you were filing your taxes single, you're okay. If you filed them married, you're okay. If you filed single head of household, you're okay. But if by chance you filed married filing separately, you're not going to be able to link to the IRS, because that's 2 tax returns, and the IRS can only bring in 1 tax return. So sometimes that tax filing status is what causes families not to be able to do the data retrieval. But again, the main thing is, if you are presented with the option to link, then the government expects you to link, and you will be taken temporarily to the government website and be presented with a couple of questions to ask, like, what was your adjusted gross income? You'll be asked, what was your address on your 2020 taxes? And that'll be the catch sometimes that gets people kind of messed up. You must enter your address exactly in the FAFSA at the IRS at that point as it was on the taxes. If you abbreviate, and you did not abbreviate your taxes, it will not be a match. The IRS will tell you it can't find you. So they're that picky. Go figure, it's the federal government. So they're that picky to make sure that everything exactly matches for it to retrieve your tax data and be able to present that back to the FAFSA.
Other question was, would we be auto-considered for all the grants, example, federal Pell Grant, in FAFSA after we submit the FAFSA application?
You are automatically given the consideration for any of the federal and state grants, depending upon your financial status and your financial standing of the household, which means income, assets, investments, number of people in the household, how many other dependents are in college at the same time. So all of that data goes in that federal formula, and that's what's determined whether the student can qualify. So the main thing is you file the FAFSA, and the college will let you know based on the calculations from the government if you qualify for Pell Grant or any of our state grants. But again, typically for Pell Grant eligibility, it's low to no income of the household. It could be a household that's receiving disability, SSI, other forms of military benefits because of disability. But typically that's the justification for why someone would qualify for Pell Grant funding. Anything else? All right, well, thank you all very much. Phil, any last words?
Yeah, so just real quick, so this fall, everybody, if y'all are putting in your college applications, getting the RDS done, and then the FAFSA, then in the springtime, we will work more and more on the local scholarships, and then y'all have till May 1st to, to accept or decide where you're gonna go to college and pay the deposits. So just by the fact that y'all are watching or being here, that shows me that y'all are getting everything done. So if I can help you, come see me, and thank you, Amy, for being here, and hope everybody has a great night.
Thank you. Thank you for driving me tonight.
Oh, you're welcome.